Summer, 1941. The sky over Tokyo sank into a dull, heavy shade of gray, much like the atmosphere in the Japanese cabinet's meeting room. The paper fans hanging from the ceiling could do nothing to dispel the suffocating tension. Ever since the United States, Britain, and the Netherlands imposed an oil embargo, cutting off the lifeblood of Japan's military machine, every breath in the political arena carried the smell of a dark future. At the Navy General Headquarters in Ichigaya, officers stood around a vast map of the Pacific. Red lines stretched from Japan down to the Dutch East Indies, across the Philippines, and toward the Hawaiian Islands. Everything revolved around one word: oil, a resource that a young industrial empire like Japan could not produce on its own. A single admiral's voice broke the silence. "We have only enough oil for 1 year, if we continue fighting in China and keep our forces in Manchuria." The room went still. No one spoke it aloud, but all understood. When the war machine runs dry, an empire collapses. Outside, military factories still roared, producing more aircraft, warships, and artillery shells, even as the oil reserves dwindled by the day. Young officers, burning with Bushido spirit, believed the empire would ignite like a dragon cornered, but the older, more seasoned men sensed something else. The path ahead might push Japan into an abyss with no return. By August, when news arrived that the US-British-Dutch alliance had agreed to strangle Japan's oil supply, Prime Minister Kono began calling for secret meetings, so secret that even some ministers were barred. In one such meeting, he sighed, "If we bow our heads, the empire will eventually collapse. If we fight, we may pay with the entire nation." The words hovered in the air like a prophecy. From the fortress of the militarist faction, however, determination grew stronger. They refused to watch the empire be suffocated, forced to retreat from China, surrender territories already taken, and become dependent on Western powers. Deep in the minds of many generals, the question was no longer, should we go to war? It was, when will the war begin? September 1941, Tokyo. A late summer rain fell on the wooden rooftops. Inside the Army-Navy General Staff Building, the generals shared a single feeling: the nation was moving toward a point of no return. The Navy warned that fuel reserves were only enough for a major campaign lasting a few months. The Army insisted that withdrawing from China would render meaningless the lives lost over 10 years of fighting. Worse yet, each unit stationed in China consumed more oil than the Japanese economy could now replace. From Washington, telegrams arrived one after another. U.S. Secretary of State Cordell Hull repeated the conditions. Japan must withdraw from China. Japan must withdraw from Indochina. Japan must renounce territorial expansion by force. To the Americans, these were principles. To Japan's militarists, these were humiliations. In one meeting, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, father of the Pearl Harbor Plan, spoke slowly. "A war with the United States cannot be long. If we start it, we must deliver a blow so stunning that America is shaken. One single blow that may change everything." It was the moment the first outlines of the Pearl Harbor attack began to form. But internal struggle remained unresolved. Prime Minister Kono, fully aware of America's overwhelming power, sought diplomatic solutions. He proposed meeting President Roosevelt to negotiate peace. But militarists opposed it. The U.S. doubted Japan's sincerity. Washington did not believe Japan wanted peace. Negotiations began to collapse. Meanwhile, Japanese intelligence analysts concluded the U.S. was preoccupied with the war in Europe. Britain was exhausted after 2 years of German air raids. The Dutch, conquered by Germany, could not defend the East Indies. Their conclusion: if Japan wanted Southeast Asian oil, this might be the only moment in history to seize it. Thus, each brick of destiny began to fall into place. Early October 1941. Tokyo's wide avenues grew colder. Ordinary citizens had no idea that behind political walls, the fate of the nation was being decided in a handful of closed-door meetings. Prime Minister Kono ultimately resigned when his diplomatic efforts failed and the militarists tightened their grip. His replacement was General Hideki Tojo, the army minister, symbol of the hardline stance. When word spread that Tojo had become prime minister, Tokyo trembled. To many, it was the sign that peace had died. In the new cabinet, Tojo declared, "We must achieve our final preparations. If diplomacy fails, Japan must be ready to act. Diplomacy, but everyone knew the real goal. The Navy was ordered to accelerate preparations for the attack on the U.S. Pacific Fleet. Pilots trained intensively at secret bases. The maps on meeting room walls no longer showed Indochina or China, they were replaced by maps of the Hawaiian Islands. In Washington, U.S. intelligence noticed unusual Japanese activity but could not determine the target. Most American officials believed that if Japan attacked, it would be the Philippines or Malaya, nearby. Logical targets. No one imagined Hawaii. No one imagined a bold strike at the heart of American naval power. In Tokyo, leaders continued polite diplomatic meetings, knowing full well they existed only to buy time for the military. When the most secret documents were laid on the table, they saw two paths. The path of peace, abandoning China and imperial ambition. The path of war, a gamble that could bring glory or total destruction. After weeks of argument, on November 5, 1941, the Supreme Council voted. Japan would go to war if negotiations failed within 30 days. The door to peace was closing. Mid-November 1941. Secret military transports rumbled through the night. Aircraft carriers Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, Shokaku, Zuikaku quietly gathered near Hokkaido. Pilots were ordered to surrender diaries, family photos, letters, anything that could reveal identities if the mission failed. One officer wrote, "No one says it, but we all understand. This is a one-way mission." In Tokyo, the full war plan was finalized. Strike Pearl Harbor to disable the U.S. Pacific Fleet. Simultaneously attack the Philippines, Malaya, Singapore, Hong Kong, and the Dutch East Indies. Capture the oil fields as fast as possible before America could respond. This was no longer a single battle. It was a pan-Pacific war. Inside the cabinet, some still hoped diplomacy could save Japan, but by late November, that hope had vanished. On November 26, the U.S. delivered the Hull Note, demanding Japan withdraw entirely from China and Indochina. To Tokyo, it was an ultimatum. In a secret late November meeting, Navy Minister Yonai sighed. "These are conditions the Empire can never accept. We have been driven to the wall." Then, on December 1, 1941, the Emperor and the Supreme Council held a final, solemn meeting. Emperor Hirohito listened as oil shortages, embargo impacts, and visions of imperial collapse were presented in painful detail. At the end, the council unanimously approved the resolution. Japan shall enter a state of war with the United States, Britain, and the Netherlands. December 2, 1941. Through encrypted radio waves, a single coded message reached the carrier strike force moving silently through the frigid North Pacific. Nitakayama Nobor 1208. Climb Mount Nitaka. Attack on December 8. At Pearl Harbor, American soldiers were busy setting up early Christmas trees, unaware that within days, a storm of steel would descend upon them. In Tokyo, leaders knew well, they had placed Japan on a path with no return. A historic gamble based on the belief that a surprise blow might force the United States to negotiate peace. But history would prove otherwise. It was a decision that would lead Japan into the greatest tragedy of its modern era. Pearl Harbor was only the beginning. The Pacific would erupt in flames. And the world would witness an empire plunging into all-out war, with all its strength and all its desperation.